MADDOW show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thank you, my friend. Much appreciated. Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour. The Argus Leader is the local newspaper in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so now, by happenstance, that newspaper ends up being the main news source for our country when it comes to the largest known coronavirus cluster in America. And the United States of America, of course, is the largest coronavirus outbreak on Earth by far. Before now, the largest known clusters of coronavirus in our country had been at the Cook County Jail in Chicago, also on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the aircraft carrier, where hundreds of sailors and the commanding officer all contracted the virus, where multiple sailors are in intensive care. At least one has died. But as of now, the cluster that appears to be bigger than all of those is in Sioux Falls, where 644 cases of coronavirus are now associated with a single pork processing plant, a plant that was shut down this weekend after last week's protests by local folks in support of people who were working at that plant who felt they were there under unsafe conditions. And after the first few hundred positive test results got returned, they shut the plant on Sunday. The plant is now closed, but there are 644 cases confirmed and traced to that one plant already. And so now there is this remarkable daily stream of news on the front page of the Argus Leader, the local paper. Smithfield worker dies from coronavirus. Wife speaks out. Smithfield Foods, now largest coronavirus hotspot in U.S. CDC in Sioux Falls to investigate. But of course, Sioux Falls is the largest city in South Dakota, and South Dakota's Republican governor, Kristi Noem, has insisted that she still will not issue a stay-at-home order in her state. She's not ordered non-essential businesses to close. She thinks really everything is fine, and South Dakota is a huge success story. And so on the front page of the Argus Leader now, alongside all the latest news about the plant and this worker who died today and the biggest cluster of cases known in the United States and the CDC flying in and the governor nevertheless still saying, it's fine, there's no reason to close anything down. Alongside all of that on the front page of the Argus Leader now, there are these daily news updates that amount to a running tally of all of the other places, all of the other open businesses in no stay-at-home order South Dakota where people are now starting to fall ill. Because you can't have 644 cases associated with one workplace and think that's going to be it. That's the universe of infection that we'll have. No, there's the running tally. In the local paper, the O'Reilly Auto Parts store on Minnesota Avenue, they've got some coronavirus. The freight company call center, coronavirus. The Lewis Drug Shop. The Walmart on Minnesota Avenue. The other Walmart on Veterans Avenue. The daycare over off East 57th Street. The cabinetry shop. The Wells Fargo Operations Center. The Premier Bank Card Office. The local retirement community over by Southeastern Avenue. The other retirement community just south of I-229 at the Get and Go. They've got some coronavirus now. At the homeless shelter, at the Tienda America Latin Grocery. I mean, it's just this running tally of all the other places, all the other workplaces where they've got positive cases now. And there may be closures, or there may be limited hours, or there may be other changes because they've got it among their workers and their residents too. This cascade. There's no stay-at-home order in the state of South Dakota because the governor there says everything is fine. She has the largest cluster in the country with more than 640 cases tied to one plant. And there's the local Argus Leader dutifully reporting all the other places where, for some reason, the virus just keeps turning up now. Just keeps claiming more people. You are aware that it's infectious, right? That it's a communicable disease? Republican Governor Kristi Noem is due to visit the closed Smithfield pork processing plant tomorrow. Today, she kept up her insistence that everything's fine in her state. Definitely no need for any new mitigation measures because South Dakota's doing so well. She said today she's in great contact with the White House, really frequent contact with the White House, and that her main focus right now is getting that Smithfield pork plant back open as soon as possible. Seems like one approach. The mayor of Sioux Falls is trying to organize his own stay-at-home order in the city since the governor won't order one. He also asked for the state to please set up an isolation center, a place for that would basically be supportive housing for people who are tested positive or who have mild symptoms, who don't want to risk infecting their families at home, right? Since just the cases at that one plant have gone from 250 on Sunday to 644 today, and it's only Wednesday. Please, can we have a place where people who have tested positive or who have symptoms can go if they do not want to risk infecting their family members? Governor Kristi Noem said, nope, absolutely not. No to that as well. And so now the Sioux Falls mayor is trying to figure out how maybe the city can do that itself to find a place to stay for potentially thousands of coronavirus patients in his city. But they're going to have to do it with no help from the state. Good luck. Because the governor there thinks that everything's fine. Today was not a good day in the American coronavirus epidemic. In addition to that out-of-control situation in South Dakota, which is now all of our problems, New Jersey reported 351 deaths in the past 24 hours, which is a lot. New York reported 752 deaths in the past 24 hours. And even with all the good bending the curve news that has started to emerge from New York, and we've got more of that coming tonight, I mean, over 750 deaths in a day is astonishing. The daily death toll in New York right now is hovering anywhere between the high 600s and the high 700s every day, steadily. I mean, that many Americans dying just in New York every single day now, consistently. I mean, for perspective's sake, when I say 700 people died in a day in New York, that means one person died every 2 minutes in New York that day. And that is still the pace at which people in New York are dying every day now, even as we are starting to get better news about New York hospitalization numbers and ICU utilization numbers going down, and hopefully the new case numbers slowing down, even though there's still thousands of new cases a day. The death toll is still high 600s, high 700s, numbers of Americans dying just in New York per day. The nursing home and the long-term care facility crisis that we've been talking about here in recent days is really exploding now, and it is not a local story anywhere. I mean, you have to follow the local news to get these numbers because the federal government still is not tracking this stuff, not reporting this stuff, not working on this apparently at all. But I can tell you it's not a local story. It's everywhere you look. Salisbury, North Carolina, for example, one nursing home there is now reporting 96 cases among residents and staff. To follow that story, I've been reading the Salisbury Post in North Carolina because that's who's covering that story. 96 American souls at that vulnerable location. San Antonio, Texas. There's one nursing home there reporting 102 coronavirus cases, 17 patient deaths already. Joliet, Illinois. Outside Chicago, one nursing home that reported one death among its patients earlier this month today updated their numbers to report that there are now 22 of their residents dead, as well as one of their staff members. One of the things we've noticed in the past few days is that there seem to be some real emerging worries about Western Pennsylvania as a potential real hotspot when it comes to nursing homes. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today put a question to the Trump administration about one Western Pennsylvania county with, they said, 17 deaths in nursing homes already. And the local concern to the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is that nobody will say publicly which facilities those deaths have happened in. They just know they're being reported as nursing home deaths in that one county. Why can't anybody know what facilities they are? Not just for the family members of people in those facilities, God bless them, but because those facilities clearly need help. In Brighton Township, Pennsylvania, which is between Pittsburgh and the Ohio state line, there's one care center there with 104 confirmed cases now reported. At the beginning of last week, that facility reported that 11 of its patients had died, but nobody knows what the numbers have been since then, and they're now reporting more than 100 confirmed cases. The local transit center has cut off its bus routes that went to that facility. People who have relatives in that facility are reporting they cannot get answers from the facility. Nobody answers when they call. One hyper-local outlet in that county, which is Beaver County, Pennsylvania, they're reporting that officials have refrozen a nearby ice arena over fears that the death toll at that one facility in Beaver County may ultimately be so high that it may necessitate the activation of temporary morgue facilities. But to get the news about these things, to get the reporting on these things, don't go to the federal government, don't go to the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which are responsible for overseeing long-term care facilities in this country. They're just not doing it. They're not working on this at all. So it's find your local paper. Browse around, see what you can figure out in terms of the numbers, see what you can figure out in terms of who might need help. That's all we've got. But like I said, this has been a particularly bad day in terms of the American coronavirus epidemic. I will tell you, in terms of the bad political response here, while what I was just describing was unfolding in Western Pennsylvania today, and the local paper there is demanding answers from the Trump administration and not getting them. Well, that's happening in Pennsylvania today. Today in the state capitol in Pennsylvania, Republican state legislators were angling to try to overturn the stay-at-home order put in place in Pennsylvania by Democratic Governor Tom Wolf. Because sure, seems like things are going great in Pennsylvania. Did I mention that they are refreezing the local ice arena because of the body count that they're worried about in Western PA? Tea Party-esque Trump-supporting protesters today demonstrated both in Kentucky and in the great state of Michigan against the stay-at-home orders that are in place in those states as well. These are doubling as sort of Trump rallies and we don't believe in the coronavirus rallies. I will tell you that in Michigan, that showed up in the local press in the form of this remarkable juxtaposition of stories on the front page of the Detroit Free Press. You see there on the left side, thousands rally against governor's stay-at-home order in Lansing. Right across in the middle column there, Oakland County could use ice rinks to store bodies. At the federal level today, we learned that the White House sourced thousands of surgical masks for its own use, for use by White House staff and officials, while the White House was simultaneously telling us, the public, that we definitely didn't need masks. Nobody who's healthy needed a mask. It's from the Washington Post tonight. Quote, as U.S. discouraged mask use for public, White House team raced to secure face coverings from Taiwan for senior staff. The White House made this urgent appeal to Taiwan on March 14th. At the same time, the U.S. government was discouraging the public from wearing masks, saying that healthy people didn't need them. The appeal resulted in 3,600 masks being made available for White House staff and officials, which is good. You know, looking out for number one. Don't let the public know. But have no fear. The White House announced yet another task force now. Not the Mike Pence task force, the other one, not the Jared Kushner one, the other one, not the opening the country task force that they said they were going to announce. Nobody's quite sure what happened to that other one. No, now they've announced the other one, which they're calling, and I quote, the Great American Economic Revival Industry Group, which appears to be just a list of 220 people in the business sector whose names they wanted to announce. Even though both NBC News and the New York Times have reported today that at least some of the people whose names were announced on this list today were people who were never even actually asked to join this task force before their names were announced as part of it, let alone were these people who actually agreed to do it. Nevertheless, the White House is using the names and reputations and affiliations of those people to try to cloak itself in their reputations, their credibility. Some members of this strange new group, however, did join a conference call with the White House today, whereupon the Wall Street Journal was first to report that what those business leaders consistently raised with the White House as a concern is the fact that there's still no freaking testing in this country. It was over a month ago that Vice President Pence announced that by the end of that week, by mid-March, there would be 4 million tests in America. It's more than a month after that announcement. We still haven't done 4 million tests total as an entire country. Today, Politico.com has a good story summing up some of the data that we've been watching with dismay for the past week or so, which is that testing in the United States is not only not good, it's getting worse. Look, this is data from the American Clinical Laboratory Association, which does the vast majority of all coronavirus testing in the United States. They do like 2/3 of the testing. Look, since the first week of April, their test numbers are actually down. Right? You hear all this happy talk about how we're going to reopen the country and what we need to have in place to reopen things. I mean, if we are seriously going to even approach talking about responsibly opening anything back up, our test numbers ought to be skyrocketing right now. They've been terrible in the past. They ought to be going through the roof right now if we're even going to approach the question of opening anything back up, right? You know that testing has been bad from day one. But the federal government's response on this specific, salient, seminal thing, it's getting worse over time, not better. The lack of a national testing strategy has been a day one debacle in this crisis. But I think it's important to realize that despite whatever happy talk you've been hearing about, and despite all the discussion about how important it is, when you look at what they're actually doing, the number of tests performed in America is dropping. Don't pay attention to what they are saying. Look at what they are doing. America's performance in terms of getting coronavirus testing made available to the American people is bad and getting worse by the day. So, like I said, not a good day in the news on where this is all going. Which raises the question of whether the direction of where this thing is going, whether it might fundamentally change from the top in not too long from now. That is the hope from Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren, a top contender for the Democratic presidential nomination this year, who today put the weight of her endorsement behind former Vice President Joe Biden.
Among all the other candidates I competed with in the Democratic primary, there's no one I've agreed with 100% of the time over the years. But one thing I appreciate about Joe Biden is he will always tell you where he stands. When you disagree, he'll listen. And not just listen, but really hear you and treat you with respect no matter where you're coming from. And he's shown throughout this campaign that when you come up with new facts or a good argument, he's not too afraid or too proud to be persuaded. Joe Biden was there at the very moment I became a senator. He swore me in. And when he did, he said, "You gave me hell, and you're going to do a great job." Because that's the thing about Joe. He wants you in the fight with him. And when you're in the fight with Joe at your side, you know you have a partner who's committed to getting something good done for this country. Joe Biden is a selfless public servant. He is committed to the fight for social, racial, and economic justice. Joe Biden will lead a government that works for the American people. And now it's up to all of us to help make Joe Biden the next president of the United States. Let's get to work. Go to joebiden.com right now and chip in your $5, make some phone calls, send some texts. We are all in this together now.
Joining us now for the interview is Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts, herself a former leading candidate for president. Senator, I really appreciate you making time and fighting through all the technical morass to be able to be with us live tonight. It's great to have you here.
Oh, it is good to be here. I want you to know Bailey is asleep at my feet here, so.
Oh, very nice. Well, if there's anything about the sound of my voice that disturbs him, I will defer and immediately end this and let him resume his nap. All right. Senator, the last time we spoke, I think it was right in that room, was right after you suspended your own campaign. And I know you fought incredibly hard to become the Democratic nominee yourself. When I asked you the day that you suspended whether you were going to endorse anyone and how you would make that decision, you put me off entirely. You wouldn't engage on the subject at all. You said that you would do it when the time was right. How did you decide that the time was right now?
I think this is the right time. Look, I think it was important that Senator Sanders have the time he needed and the space he needed to make the decision about what he was going to do with his campaign. And now Senator Sanders has endorsed, President Barack Obama has endorsed, and I was very, very glad to do it today. You know, the first 15 minutes of your program tonight was about leadership. and how we need a different leader in Washington. Joe Biden is going to be an excellent president because he's fundamentally a good man. He is prepared for an emergency. He will fight for every human being. And most of all, he's a person who has empathy. And think what that means at this moment. Donald Trump measures everything, and in this crisis and before, in terms of what does it mean to Donald Trump? Does it advance his political interests? Does it advance his financial interests? And that's the extent of his measure. And that's why we are in so much trouble right now in the middle of a crisis. Joe Biden is very different. He is the kind of man who has human empathy, who lost a child, who sent a son off to war. He is a man, I saw it up close and personal, just almost 7 years ago right now after the Boston Marathon bombings, when he was here to comfort the parents of a police officer who had been slain as part of the terrorism against Boston and against this country. He's a man who has a good heart, and that's what we need in a leader. Someone who is steady, who is prepared, but ultimately who cares not just about himself, but cares about everyone else. That's what is going to get us through a crisis. That is what is going to help us rebuild this country.
I'm struck by both in the endorsement video that you made today, the remarks you just made right now, the personal nature of the endorsement, that you're not just talking about, policy agreements. You're not just talking about, ways in which you have congruent views of the world, that it does feel to be coming from a personal place. I know that when you endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that was an endorsement that you took very seriously, and you did it on your own time frame, and it was very important when it landed. One of the things that happened around the time of that endorsement and thereafter was that you worked closely with Secretary Clinton and her campaign to make sure that the hopefully incoming Hillary Clinton administration was going to represent the values that you and Secretary Clinton shared. You tried to set up, you were very involved in terms of who was going to staff that administration. I wonder about the kind of conversations that you've had with Vice President Biden and how you anticipate being involved in hopefully setting up what will be his incoming administration.
So look, you know me. You know what I've been fighting for all of my career, so that hardworking people across this country get a real chance, and that opportunity doesn't just go to a handful of folks at the top, but really does go to everybody in this country, and that we make the investments to make that happen. My conversations with Joe Biden long predate this presidential race. They predate the 2016. We've had a lot of conversations about how we build an America going forward, with lots of different pieces and parts to that. Now that I'm no longer in the presidential race, I had a chance to resume a lot of those and to start a bunch of new ones. Because look, we both want the same thing. We want this country to work, and we want it to work for everyone. So I'm in this fight to help in any way I can, to help on the policy front, to help by getting out there and talking about it, to help by telling people, go to joebiden.com, pitch in your $5, send some text, volunteer some time. Because it truly is the case. We are all in this now. And we have seen the importance of having a leader that we can count on in a crisis. It's not Donald Trump. It is Joe Biden.
If he asked you to be his running mate, would you say yes?
Yes.
I'm so happy you just gave me a concise answer to that. I'm going to let that sit there and resonate for a second. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Senator Elizabeth Warren, Democrat of Massachusetts. Stay with us.